morning, Maybridge. How are we doing? Welcome to Maybridge Community Church. If you are here for the first time, obviously not actually at the church, but if you're listening into Maybridge for the first time, then you are especially welcome. And if you'd like to find out more about who we are, then do head over to our website, www.maybridge.org.uk. But for whoever you are, what I'm here to do this morning is to tell you a little bit more about the book of James, which is this tiny little part of the Bible that we find right towards the end, written by, it's believed, Jesus' younger brother. And it's this wonderful letter that he wrote to the church 2,000 years ago, full of all kind of top tips and wisdom. And we've been calling this series Life Hacks as just some really great ways of thinking about the way that we live that were relevant 2,000 years ago. And it turns out are relevant today, even in the middle of coronavirus, even with everything else that is going on. In fact, some of it seems especially relevant. And today's one is no different. Today, we're looking at just 3 or 4 short verses in chapter 4, where James addresses the plans that we make for our lives when actually we have no idea what is coming tomorrow. And if that doesn't sound familiar to you, then I don't know where you have been over the last few weeks, because I think it's incredibly relevant and something for us all to have a bit of a listen to. So let me just read through these verses for you, and we'll carry on and see what we think James is getting at in the midst of this passage. So James chapter 4, verse 13, let's read. So look here, you who say, today or tomorrow we're going to a certain town and we'll stay there a year. We'll do business there and make a profit. How do you know what your life will be like tomorrow? Your life is like the morning fog. It's here a little while and then it's gone. What you ought to say is, if the Lord wants us to, we will live and do this or that. Otherwise, you're boasting about your own pretentious plans, and all such boasting is evil. Remember, it's a sin to know what you ought to do and then not do it. So, these are not the most joyous verses in the Bible. I so far have not met anybody who has this on a fridge magnet in their kitchen, or framed and beautifully embossed on their walls. This is some hard-hitting stuff. He's essentially giving a bit of a dressing down to the arrogant in the church that he's writing to, and most of us probably don't want to put ourselves in that bracket of people, do we? But actually, I quite like the way that the New Living Translation kind of subtitles this paragraph. It says that actually this is a warning to the self-confident. Now again, not all of us would put ourselves into that bracket either, would we? But here's the truth. Where whoever we are, all of us plan our lives because it helps us to feel more confident about the future. It helps us to get through the day, to create the routines and the plans and have the things to look forward to and the things that we've put our security in. And that really is what James is addressing. So I want to get you to stick with me and see actually what we can glean from this passage that is good and we can apply to our lives today at the moment, here in England or here in the UK or wherever it is around the world that you're listening, that can help us to do things in perhaps a slightly different way. So let's just start by looking at the first couple of verses that are here. So he says, look here, you who say, today or tomorrow we're going to a certain town and we'll stay there a year. We'll do business there and make a profit. How do you know what your life will be like tomorrow? Now, just that question there in verse 14, what a corker. I would imagine that in living history, there has not been such a collective understanding of how serious that question is. How do you know what your life will be like tomorrow? Now, all kinds of things have happened in all different parts of the world, but I think that probably nobody alive can remember a time when the whole world was facing this kind of uncertainty, when the whole world was waking up each morning, not knowing if it was going to be sick, not knowing if it was going to have a job, not knowing how it was going to put food on the table, not knowing if their kids were going to go to school, so much that we don't know. And so many of us have been, forced almost to bring back the horizon of our lives to much, much nearer and try and just get through one day at a time, because looking too far forward is so uncertain that frankly it's a little bit frightening. But actually who James is talking to at this point is clearly some kind of merchant at this point, because that's how they did business in those days. The merchants would travel, they'd plan these trips, they'd go and they'd settle in a town or a local area, and they'd build their contact list and they'd start trading, and when that was established and they'd started to make a profit, they'd move on to the next place. And that's who he's talking to. And he's saying, this is who it is. You're thinking through how to make a profit, how to expand your business. And actually, the methods nowadays might be different. We might better use Zoom conversations, and we can send emails, and we have internet banking, and we do our business online, and there's all different ways that businessmen work nowadays and entrepreneurs. And what James isn't saying here, so please don't hear this, is that business is bad. And what he isn't saying is that you shouldn't try and build a business. And what he isn't saying is that it's bad to do that and to make plans and to do it. But what he is saying is, careful. Be careful. Here's a little bit of a warning. And you might still be sitting there thinking, well, I'm not a businessman and I don't have to think about those things. But this is still for you, because we all plan in some shape or form. Now, see, my family, we run on Google Calendars. Now, other calendars are available and you're welcome to use whichever type you like, even paper ones. But for us, you know, it's my husband and I, we both travel, we both have jobs, we've got, actually, we only have 3 kids at home nowadays, which makes life simpler. But at one point we had 6, you know, and organising our life was a little bit like a military campaign. So we have Google Calendars, and one colour's Steve's work, and one colour's my work, and one colour's home things, and another colour's the kids. And then we've got access to extended families, and I think Steve's got a football calendar, you know, and there's all these things, and they all merge into this one glorious concoction, a grid on our diary, and it's on our phone, it's on our laptops, it's everywhere, so that we don't forget anything, and we make plans, and the kids do get picked up from school, and dinner does get cooked, and you know, travelling does happen, and we do get to the right places. We plan, and our diaries are usually open years into the future, and Steve might be booking travel in, and I might be booking conferences in, and we'll be thinking ahead and putting our holidays in. And what this last few weeks has shown us is that planning is all well and good. It's all well and good, and it may well have kept everybody in order and stopped us leaving a child on a street corner somewhere when we were meant to have picked them up. But it's all a bit meaningless when the world turns upside down, isn't it? You know, in the heartbeat, our worlds have totally and utterly changed. It has utterly gone upside down, and actually, it's one of those things that the plan. But I think what really matters is that we don't think that James is telling us to stop planning. He's not. He's just saying, be careful. And it happens everywhere. You know, we've got our Google Calendars, but even at church, you know, Monday the 16th of March, we had this grand meeting. Now, Matt actually was already self-isolating, so Phil and I led the team as we started to make the plans of what church would look like in what was clearly becoming a changing situation. We had this incredible grid by the end of it of what we would do if the government said this, and what we would do if this happened, and this activity, this is what would happen to this activity, and this fell into that category. It was beautiful, glorious, you know, spreadsheet of that anyone who loves spreadsheet would just have loved it. It was awesome. And then there was a press conference, and then the whole thing came defunct like that, because suddenly nothing was going to happen. Now, that doesn't mean that planning was stupid. It doesn't even mean that it was arrogant. It did mean that it was pointless by the end of the day, but actually it might well come back in use as things begin to open up again. But it means that actually we need to take this challenge to our way of thinking about the world that we live in, because so many of us actually live in this world where we're just trying to control it. And I think that what James is trying to say is this, saying just don't forget who's in control. And he finishes this with this, you know, rather frightening little, you know, phrase, your life is like the morning fog, which isn't particularly complimentary, is it, if we're honest? The morning fog often looks a little bit pretty, might slow the traffic down, but it's gone the minute that the sun shines. And actually, James isn't the first person to say this in the Bible. If you go back in time, then King Solomon, the wisest man that ever lived, he wrote a whole ode to how meaningless life is. And it's not something that we like to dwell upon. It's not something actually that necessarily ties in with what we think God says about us as human beings, because he's created us with value and purpose and all the rest of it. But actually, James's point matters. He says, actually, you need to put some of your life into perspective. You need to think about it in the grand scheme of things, because who are you in a world of billions of people? Who are you in a timeline that spans millions of years? Who are you in a universe that is bigger than any of us can begin to get our heads around? Who are you? But here's the thing, for each of us in the movie of our lives, in the story of our lives, we are the central character, and it can be so easy to get that out of control. In my family, we sometimes ask the question, you know, around the dinner table, so if they did make a movie about your life, who would you have to play you? I like to think Julia Roberts, because she's pretty cool, and probably a bit old actually to play me. Just going to put that out there. Don't tell her I said so. But I don't know who it would be. But here's the thing. They're not going to make a movie of my life, and I'm fairly confident they're probably unlikely to make a movie about yours unless I'm talking to somebody who's way more interesting than I imagine is actually listening at the moment or done something extraordinary. Please don't take offence, anybody who now thinks I've been rude to them. But, like, it's not going to happen. Most of us live perfectly beautiful, lovely lives that will affect very few people around us. It's just the truth. And James isn't trying to get us all to feel terribly depressed about who we are. He isn't. He's saying, do you know what? Let's just get this in perspective. Let's get your plans and your imagination around how much control you have over your future back into perspective and put God back at the centre. And that can all sound a bit devastating, can't it? Your plans are useless and your life's worth nothing. But it's only devastating, actually, if that's where everything that matters to you lies. You see, if you're holding this stuff wrong, if your worth, your identity and your security lie in the events that are in your diary, in the plans that you've got for the future, in the securities you've put in the bank or your pension fund or your career progression, if your sense of worth comes from your idea of your self-importance, well then those two verses are devastating. As James goes, it's all worth nothing. But actually this next verse lifts it back up into somewhere totally different, because what James carries on to say is this. He says, what you ought to say is, if the Lord wants us to, we'll live and we'll do that and we'll do this or that. And, you know, on one level, this reminds me of a lot of the people that were in church when I was growing up, and they'd finish a lot of their sentences with the phrase, God willing. So we're going to spend Christmas with the kids this year, God willing. We're going to, you know, I'm hoping I'm getting a promotion, God willing. We're going to have this for tea, God willing. And sometimes it became a bit trite, but mostly it was this sense of, well, I've made a plan, but of course God might have other plans. I'm going to consult the boss. But actually, when you look at this, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but when you look at this phrase and you think, well, what you ought to say is, if the Lord wants us to, we will live and we'll do this or that. There's actually some incredible value to be found in our lives just in that phrase. This is about more than, you know, how we do our plans, although it's definitely that. But it's also about the fact that it says, if the Lord wants us to, we'll live. That means he wants us to. This is talking about the God of the universe, creator of heaven and earth, creator of everything, like Lord of lords, kings of kings. And he has chosen us. He has created us. He wants us to live. That's why we're here. And he has plans for our life. Like, that is hidden in this phrase. That is there. And that gives us phenomenal worth. And that means that if we place our identity, security, and feeling of worth in those things, in who God says he is, in who God says we are, and in the plans he says he has for our lives, well then actually this news is nowhere near as devastating as we thought. It just means it's about adjusting our vision a little bit. It's about getting a better perspective on our life and how we fit into the rest of the world. And actually it gives us a much more secure ground on which to base our lives and our future. It's actually phenomenal. It turns it all upside down and on its head. But this phrase, this like, I've got a plan, God willing, actually is beautiful. It's a beautiful way of living, and it takes a lot of pressure off of our lives as well. It's not about, copying out of responsibility for lives and saying, well, I'm just waiting to see what God does. We still need to make plans. James isn't saying don't do that. We still need to do the best with the tools and the equipment and the resources that God gives us. But it's about making those plans in a very different way. And in fact, it comes back again to that prayer that James's big brother Jesus taught his followers to say, the Lord's Prayer, where, he says, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And it means that actually we start planning in a different way, and our plans begin to look a little bit more about, well, what would it look like for me to be involved in bringing God's kingdom to earth? What would my plans look like if I was helping earth to look a little bit more like heaven? What would it look like to plan if I'm trying to do this in line with what God's will is for the world? What would that look like? And what none of this means is, and I really do want you to hear this, is that it doesn't mean that it's not disappointing for our plans to go astray. As a family, we're fairly confident that our very exciting plans for our summer holiday are not going to happen. And I'm disappointed about that, and so are the kids. My daughter is she's not really disappointed not to sit her A-levels, but she's worried about what's going to come. She'd pinned her future, the significant amount of her future, on these exams in June, and now suddenly She doesn't know what's going to happen, and it's different. And her plans to finally pull her finger out and get on with the work in time for the exams, well, they've gone up in a puff of smoke. Like, what? It's okay to be disappointed about this. You know, some people have lost their weddings. People have lost their loved ones. And then they haven't been able to go to their funeral or throw a proper funeral for people. Like, these things are genuinely disappointing. This isn't about saying, oh, your plans are useless, so you shouldn't even have to. Like, it's okay to grieve some of the stuff that we've lost. But let's take that moment to know that's how we feel, but then step back and see the bigger pictures. You see, the truth is I am disappointed that I don't get to go to Morocco this summer, because it was going to be cool, and we haven't done something like that as a family before, and it is disappointing. But it's okay, because I trust God's plans for my life, and I know that he works everything for good. It might not involve Morocco. It might be something totally different. It might be a holiday in my back garden this year, but it will be okay. You see, I'm disappointed that half our family income has disappeared overnight. But it's okay, because I know that God has a plan for life, and I know that he provides. And it might look different to the way we had expected for the rest of the year. But it's all right. I can trust God with the rest of my life, because his plans are better than my plans, even though they might not look as shiny and they might not be the things that I dreamt of. And it might be way more than a lost holiday. It might be way more than tightening the belt a little bit when we go to the supermarket. It might mean downsizing homes. It might mean losing cars. It might mean all number of things that we never dreamt of. It might mean letting go of dreams that we've held for years. But you see, if we're able to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. If we're able to make our plans and to put our hope, to put our security, our identity and our feeling of worth in God, then actually the uncertainty of now becomes much more bearable, because we put it in a God who is as faithful as a rock, who's steadfast and true, and who has us, and it's okay. But James doesn't finish there. He hasn't done with us yet. He continues and he says, verse 16, otherwise you're boasting about your own pretentious plans, and all such boasting is evil. Right? James does not pull his punches. And this one comes at you like a sucker punch. Katie didn't get it the first time round. Your plans are pretentious. And if you're boasting in them, if you think that's where your security lies, in your planning, your ability, your capability, your success, your strategy, your vision, well, that's just evil. Which is strong language, isn't it? It's quite something. But you see, he's got a point. If you go back and lift out from that verse that we started with, that was about, looking at merchants and profit making, you begin to see that perhaps some of what sits behind our plans is profit, is financial security, is success, is academic accolades. He doesn't say that, but you could add to this, couldn't you? All the other things, that we've become well known, that we've become popular, that we've become all the other things that our society and our culture holds up as important. And James is saying, is effectively saying, you have got your priorities wrong. You're boasting in all the things that you can do instead of holding on to what God can do for you. You're trusting in yourself. You're not trusting in him. And this stuff matters. You've put yourself on the throne of your life. You see, once we get our diaries out and our calendars and our spreadsheets and everything else that we use to plan the future, we can so swiftly become atheists, can't we? We assign God to a slot on a Sunday, and then we fill in the rest with all the other things that will bring us joy, that will bring us money, that will bring us happiness. And we forget that your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it will be in heaven. And James is just trying to warn us against that, because that is the road to disappointment, the road to devastation, and the road to, frankly, a pretty scary place. And then he finishes it with one parting shot, because he's James and he just seems to feel the need to. But it's one that actually is a challenge for all of us. He says this: remember, it is sin to know what you ought to do and then not to do it. Ouch. Ouch. Like, we don't like that word sin. I don't like it. And I know that a lot of preachers try to avoid it because the word sin offends people. You see, we think of sin as somebody who's like a mass murderer, or, the drug dealer on the corner of the street preying on vulnerable people, or somebody who's a fraudster and taking other people's money. We definitely don't want to think it's us. And we definitely don't want to think it's us because we just didn't get around to doing something last week or this morning or now, or we're planning to put off this afternoon. Because that is deeply uncomfortable. That's not okay. But here's the thing. If If we're following Jesus, if we've spent time getting to know him, then we do know the good that we should be doing, don't we? We know what that looks like. We know what loving our neighbour looks like. We know what spending time with God and deepening our relationship with him looks like. And yet we don't always do it because we get so busy and our diaries get so full. And frankly, we just don't really want to because it's awkward and it puts us out and it's uncomfortable. And James is just gently reminding us that actually that's not really okay. And I think we're at this incredible place in history at the moment. Never been anything really quite like it. And it's a bit horrible, like it's really horrible, and it's really horrible for quite a lot of people. But whether this is a period for you where you are busier than you have ever been, or you're bored brainless, we all have an opportunity to stop and to reassess. And maybe to take a quick look at our diary and to see actually what does fill our diary? What would we have been doing if we weren't here? I mean, I think most of our diaries are just full of things that we're not doing anymore. But I think it's quite a telling thing to get those diaries out, whether they're online or they're on, they're in a paper diary or wherever they are, and to go, what actually did fill my diary? What were the things that filled it up? Because those things reflect your priorities. They do. Our diaries are almost like a little window into our soul. What are your priorities? What are the things that were really important to you? One of the things Steve and I realised really swiftly, well, one of the first things we had to do in this series, in this season, was like rebudget. Sit there and go, can we afford to pay all the bills anymore? Like, what's this going to look like? And as we began to realise that we could make it work, the next question was, well, what are we normally spending all the money on? So we've done quite a reassessment of the way that we spend money and where does it go and how do we do that? And we're really watching where the money goes at the moment just to try and get an idea. And we know that even when things go back to normal, actually we don't want to go back to the old. We want things to look different going forward. And I think it's like that for everything. You see, so often we squeeze things out, don't we? Because we put in the important things first, don't we? We do. Put in people's birthdays, mustn't forget those. And a holiday, we won't book anything there. And for us, we sit there and go, right, well, that's going to be date night and that's going to be family night. And when that's Steve's travelling and doing some work over there, and Bekah's got a conference, and and then she's preaching here, and we've got to get this piece of work done over here, and well, that that's we need to write a book there, and you start putting these things in, and you slot them in to get them all in, and then everything else has to fit in around the edges. And I think that so often, actually, God ends up having to fit in around the edges of our life, doesn't he? And we get to the end of the week, and we're just shattered, and we think, oh, it's just too much to get up and go to church. In fact, this is what's quite nice about this series. You can watch church from bed if you're so inclined, and it's going to be hard work perhaps getting back out the door at the end of this season and going back physically into church, except for the extroverts. They're going to be desperate to see everybody. And but we squeeze it out, and when our routines turn upside down, we suddenly forget to put in that time to spend with God. Or it might be that neighbour that we wanted to help, or the friend that we were going to give a call to, and we just run out of time. But our time reflects our priorities. What's important in your life? And I just want to say, like, why not use this period to take some time out to reflect and to stop and to think before my diary starts filling up again, before I get back into it, before they say we can go out and start doing things again, before we can go back to work. What do I want my diary to look like going forward? What are my priorities going to be? What's going to go in first to my diary? Who are the people I know I want to see? Like, I know that as soon as I'm allowed, I want to go and see my mum. I do. I might not even be allowed in a house, but I'm going to go and I'm going to knock on a door and I'm going to sit in a driveway and I'm going to talk to her because I haven't seen her for ages and I miss her. Like, what are you going to do when all this gets out? What are your priorities going to be? And how are you going to align those priorities with God and what he wants for your life and the things he wants you to do and the plans he has for you, which are good, and the plans to bring you hope and a future. Let's take this time out to think about that because I think it matters. Let's not waste this opportunity, this wake-up call to what is going on in our world. Now, I'm going to finish the prayer in just a moment, but after that, if you're listening on our YouTube channel and you're following the service through in the playlist, and if you're not, you can find it if you go to YouTube and look for Maybridge Church. But if you are, then we're going to sing some songs that help us to reflect. Fortunately, you're not going to listen to me sing it, but they're going to help us to reflect on some of this, on what does it look like actually to put God back in the centre, to make him the priority, to make him the building block around which everything else fits. What does that look like? In fact, the first song we're going to sing is a song we don't sing normally as a church, so you won't know it maybe. So maybe just sit and listen and read the words and use it to help help yourself pray and to kind of commit this stuff to God. And then there will be a song that you'll be able to join in with and like declare some of this out. But I want to finish by praying, and I'm actually going to use a prayer that somebody way more eloquent than I wrote a long time ago, a guy called Charles de Foucault, because it's a prayer that helps us to frame this and to submit our lives to God and to put him back on the throne in our lives. Let's pray. God, I abandon myself into your hands. Do with me whatever you will. Whatever you may do, I thank you. I am ready for all. I accept all. Let only your will be done in me and in all your creatures. And into your hands I commend my spirit. I offer it to you with all the love that is in my heart, for I love you, Lord. And so I want to give myself, to surrender myself into your hands, without reserve and with boundless confidence. Amen. Those might be hard words to pray, but my prayer for you over the rest of this week is that you would be able to submit yourselves to God in that way, and that those words could become really true for you as you deepen your relationship with him and allow him to be your identity, security, and where you find your worth. Take care.